guess we're going to talk about the Resident Evil 5 demo. Now, technically, we're not supposed to be playing this because it was only released in Japan, which makes no sense whatsoever.
So let's talk about the Biohazard 5 demo.
Right. And you know, I'm not a person to condone piracy, but it's not like we're taking money out of Capcom's pocket here. But you basically can play this on your US system. All you have to do is get the files, burn them to a CD, stick it in your 360, play it as a media disc, go to your demo section, boom, there it is. Obviously, there are some problems with that, like you cannot play like the cinemas without them skipping, I noticed.
Yeah.
And multiplayer.
It takes about 8 hours for it to load the level off a CD. You don't realize how awesome DVDs are and how much they can hold until you go back to a CD again and you're like, wow, these things are freaking slow.
Yeah.
But yeah, and actually we have figured out that you can play online, even if you're playing the Japanese demo in the US.
Great.
Although I was not brave enough to do it, I was scared to connect my console to Xbox Live and play it. But someone else here was brave enough.
Risk the wrath of the banhammer.
They did, and apparently it worked. But what are our overall impressions? Now, we played this game, 8 times in the last 2 years at different events or whatever? This is the first time we really had a chance to kind of sit in our own living rooms on our couch and really enjoy it for what it is instead of standing there while 10 people wait behind you. So what are your impressions? Patrick, what do you think?
Well, I think it's pretty safe to say that it's definitely the game that we've all been, anticipating. I didn't find myself disappointed with it one bit. Although I would have to say I was a little bit peeved that there is still no running while shooting.
It's Resident Evil, though. It's never been in the series, and it probably never will be.
That's true, but I mean, think back to when Resident Evil 4 came out, and it was so genre, defining for it to, break into this third-person shooter mold. We've seen that, progress into Gears of War 2, Dead Space, which took that format and did it pretty well, maybe a little better.
Right.
And just to kind of return back to the same turn, shoot, stop, reload. It seems a little stiff to me, but I think it was still lots of fun. Capcom definitely
I'd
showing
agree with
its
that
chops,
a little bit.
so.
One thing you do notice is that you see the enemies kind of like cycling around.
Yeah.
Like they'll run up and they'll get within about 10 feet of you, and then they just kind of stop and hang out there for a while before they rush in.
They're dead. They're out of breath.
Yeah. Technically, they're not breathing, but but I think it's just so it'll account for the way the control scheme is. Because if they really just kept rushing in like the way Left 4 Dead works, it would be a joke.
Yeah.
You got to kill maybe
you'd be
one,
dead.
but you'd be dead instantly. So it is kind of weird that they're working around the shortcomings of the control scheme.
Yeah.
And I think maybe even halfway through development, they were like, wait a minute, this is kind of a dinosaur at this point. You notice that they added the strafe.
Yeah. Trying to compensate for it a
And
little
they're
bit.
trying to compensate for it a little bit because we had heard they were going to completely rework the control scheme, and then we get the Tokyo Game Show where they're supposed to unveil it, and I was like, so we can move and shoot at the same time, and they were like, no.
You can do a side shimmy now.
But how old is Resident Evil? I mean, the first one came out in
97, I think. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So we're talking about 11-year-old franchise.
Yeah.
And has it progressed again? I asked the same question about Street Fighter last week.
Well, four was a big kick for it, and then
Four
maybe
was
they're
phenomenal.
not ready to go up the next level. They're kind of sticking close to 4.
Because they really
before
only
it
made
took
one
them
game with that
It took them
formula.
5 or 6 years, and people are like, "What the hell is with these tank controls?" And they're like, "It's Resident Evil. You'll like it. Just keep playing it." And I mean, the games. I'm one of the rare people that actually like Resident Evil 3. It had some cool stuff in it. I thought it was a rewarding, challenging game.
I've actually liked almost all the Resident Evil games.
Yeah,
I'm a sucker for that franchise.
I didn't like Umbrella Chronicles.
Yeah,
The
I mean, that
on-rails
doesn't, I mean,
reshooter.
like,
What about Gun
I
Survivor?
mean, like the proper Resident Evil, like Code Veronica. I loved all those games.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, granted, it was definitely starting to show its age, and I think they had the right time to change it for Resident Evil 4. But if you look at the history, it's like, how many games did they make with that old style where it was like you're a tank and you spin on an axis?
Yeah.
They made a lot of games with that style before they finally decided to overhaul it, and I think you're probably going to see the same thing here.
And I think it's still good enough. I mean, Resident Evil 4, it was a great, awesome game. It was good on Wii 2, and I think they've moved it forward enough to where they can kind of stick close to that formula, take its strengths. Maybe, as they bring up, you're sitting still, you can't really move, so you have to either make your shots count or else, you're going to get screwed. So.
Well, I mean, they do design the game
style
accounting for the control scheme.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
And maybe that's what happened. They tried to completely revamp the control scheme, and they're like, wait a minute, we'd have to completely rework the AI of all the enemies. Otherwise, it would be so easy if you could move and shoot and aim at the same time. You kind of have to go in out of the gate and create a game with that in mind. Otherwise, you'd end up spending another year and a half developing it, trying to make it work with the new controls.
Mm-hmm. I think to a lot of people, the leap from Resident Evil 4 to 5 will be analogous to, say, the leap between Metal Gear Solid 3 and 4, where it pretty much retained the same kind of essence, but just more polished, obviously has that next gen shine on it.
Question
That's a good analogy.
I want to ask is was anybody, did anybody get any actual scares out of playing this game? Because I remember the first Resident Evil game was actually one of the very few games to give me a nightmare.
Oh yeah, the dog jumping through the window.
The birds, the snake coming, the huge snake coming out.
Some close calls with the chainsaw dude.
Yeah,
It's scary.
You can see in one of the gameplays, running
it's more
around.
exciting than scary now.
It's not like you get the cheap thrill, like the dog busting through the window. You're like,
Yeah.
oh my god! It's like you know that dude with the big axe is like 5 feet behind you, and you're hauling ass trying to get away. So you can get far enough away to spin around,
And
get your
shoot.
weapon loaded up, and ready to fight. That kind of scary.
Yeah, I mean, in that aspect, Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3 were all about building that suspense.
Right.
You know, with the fixed camera angles, you know, the little scripted
Controlling what
events.
you could see.
Yeah. And as of 4 and 5, it's more about maintaining that high level of tension throughout.
It's more of an
it's an
adrenaline
action.
rush,
It
really.
is. Yeah.
Well, I also don't think the intent of the demo is really to scare you as much as it is to give you an idea of how
Yeah,
it plays.
just drop
Just
you in
throwing
the
out
thick
the
of
There's
whole
it.
plenty
thing
of room
because,
to build some atmosphere and set up some.
The franchise has
changed.
changed. I mean, it's changed
Yeah.
from survival horror, zombies, horror being part of the word, and now it's not so much the horror type game. I mean, it's moved into more very exciting still action adventure.
It was a little bit scary though. Whenever you're inside and you're like looking out the window,
Yeah.
and they're doing that big rally, and then the guy with the megaphone sees you through the window, and he points at you, and all the people turn and look at you, and they got like the crazy red eyes. Like I was
Yeah.
like, oh.
I was using furniture to board up the doors and the windows, and you're like just hiding in the back of the room, just waiting. And sure enough, the
Here they
furniture
come.
starts
Yeah.
rocking, and they breaking their way.
I mean,
into
it
the
is
room.
scary. It's a
freaky.
different kind of scary, but it is very frantic. Very like my heart was beating pretty hard the whole time I played, especially the first couple times I played the demo. So
Yeah, I mean, there's only so many ways that you could have a dog jump through a window.
right.
So
Eventually, that's going to wear thin. Yeah.
exactly. So it was good for them to change directions.
As you said, I mean, they've moved from the fixed camera now to more of a free camera behind you. They don't control all the camera angles. So yeah, I mean, there are certain ways you have to move. I just, I lament, the passing of some of that because actually, it was one of the things that sucked me in. I did like that whole, survival horror aspect.
A lot of those things, though, it's like you're really nostalgic for something. Then you go back, if you actually play that game or experience it, you're like, oh.
I've said it before and I said it again. Nostalgia is only fine until you actually go back and
And
relive
experience it. Yep.
But I played this demo at E3, and it's it's obviously a more polished version. But again, it's going to be a great game. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, let's go around the horn here, and let's just see if anybody here, if any other anticipation has been quelled, and maybe you aren't as excited to play the game after playing the demo. Patrick,
Admittedly, I'm a lot more excited for a game now.
you're more excited.
Yeah,
Justin,
No, I'm psyched about the co-op. It was
you're
fun.
more
Yeah.
excited than you were before?
co-op's
I
awesome.
think, I think a little bit. I can see playing online the whole way through.
Okay.
Yeah,
Spamming,
same
come
here.
on,
I think
bro.
the strategies incorporated with the co-op is awesome because I'd have one guy hiding in the back of a alleyway, and I'd lure the boss out. And as he was chasing me down the alleyway, that's where my friend was waiting with a gun, and that was fun. I like that co-op and working together.
I'm definitely more excited. I think what I'm more excited about is when I talked to them in Japan at TGS, we did an interview, and they said that it was going to be a good 6 or 8 hours longer than Resident Evil 4.
Nice.
So if you think about how big RE4 was, which by today's action game standards is pretty freaking big, you tack another 6 or 8 hours on top of that, then you start to realize that what we've seen of this game so far is nothing.
Yeah.
And there's so much more to experience, so much more to really see, and I think that's what's really got me excited to play it. So won't be too much longer of a wait.
I knew it from the moment I arrived. There's no reason here. No humanity.
All right,